death is almost not existent. I've spoken with, and it's not nearly as much of a process as we make it out to be. I have spoken with spirits who fly out of their bodies at the time their car hits a tree, or it's just not the big deal we make it out to be.
Hello and welcome to the Magic is Real podcast. I am Shannon. I'm your host. I am a psychic medium and a lover of all things spiritual and metaphysical. This podcast focuses on spiritual journeys such as near death experiences, healing experiences, out of body experiences, spirit communication, and much more. Also, sometimes things like UFOs. We talk about all of it. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, glad you're here. Hope you enjoy the podcast. If you would do me a favor, if you do like it, uh, would you please subscribe, like the video even? And if you leave a comment, that makes all the difference in the world for getting the podcast out there. I believe in this project so much. I love and hope my intention is to take the fear out of death for people and for us to be able to realize that this is not all there is. So today I am so excited because I have with me Hollister Rand. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Hollister and then we'll let Hollister speak. I thank you, Hollister, for agreeing to be here with me today. Well, first I'll tell you who she is. Uh, Hollister is also a psychic medium and a speaker, a writer. She is the author of Everything You Wanted to Know About the Afterlife, but Were Afraid to Ask. She also wrote I'm Not Dead, I'm Different. And I'm going to let her talk more about her work from her perspective. We all like to be called something different: spirit translator, evidential psychic medium. Before we launch in, I just had a cute little surprise for Hollister, but also a way to explain who she is. My friend Candace told me about her years ago when I was in Prescott, Arizona, and I was living with Candace. We were in Sedona together, and she said, "Oh my God, you know who you have to meet? It's Hollister Rand." And she told me this story. She just re-left me a voicemail today that I just want you to hear, Hollister, and then we'll get into it. I'm going to just start from sort of halfway in.
Maybe like 6 months later or so. And she got Hollister's contact from a traveling nurse who saw her after her son had passed unexpectedly as a child. Anyway, so my mom had a brilliant private reading with her in so many ways. I mean, we still talk about it. And so I couldn't afford to do that. So I went to this thing. I go hoping I get some sort of contact to the other side. And then she comes walking down the aisle right into the row of me and DJ. And she's like, someone over here. And she was like, did somebody leave a note in a note in a casket kind of a thing? And at first DJ didn't raise his hand. And then she said something else that I'm trying to remember what the follow-up was, but then DJ had to raise his hand and he was like, oh my gosh. And so now he got the reading and
I forgot to play the part where she explained that her now husband, and she had invited him and they had just started dating and it was their first fight because he said, I do not feel comfortable with this. I was raised born again. This is against my beliefs and I feel weird about it. And she said, well, screw you. I'm going anyway. So he knew because he worshiped the ground she walked on that he was like, fine, I'll go. And this is what happened. So sorry, that was not
That's
a well
okay.
told. Here you go.
she stuck with him for probably a solid 10 or 12, 13 minutes and came up with so many distinctly, accurate, inevitable details that nobody could have known. She knew about, she said, is your older brother deceased? I didn't even know DJ had an older brother and we were dating, that he had an older brother that had passed. And one of his half brothers, he's got, 10 brothers and sisters, but the oldest one passed. So now DJ's the eldest. So she said that. And then the letter in the casket, he had written his grandpa a letter after he passed and put it in the casket. And his grandpa didn't really want to say much more, but he just wanted him to know that he'd been around. And she was saying that his deceased brother, she said to him, she goes, do you play poker? Are you a gambler? And DJ's like, yeah. And she goes, you win a lot, don't you? And DJ's like, well, yeah, I do, and she's like, your brother's telling me it's because that's when he hangs out with you. And she specifically said he likes to hang out with you when you're listening to hip hop or gambling. Like he enjoyed those things. And it was really funny to hear Hollister be like, when you listen to hip hop. I did have a group. And so, anyway, so she was accurate on that, on the older brother, on the grandpa. She said a couple other things that were very astute and accurate. I can't remember off the top of my head just right now, but we were just like blown away. And DJ left and he apologized to me profusely. And he goes, that was the most beautiful and positive. And he goes, I don't know what my mom's talking about. Because Hollister opened her program with, you know, we invite in all good things. Like I'm going to say a prayer and we're only inviting in all the good stuff, you know? And so yeah, my husband was forever changed. He is a believer in mediumship and psychic ability and the other side and the spirit world and realms. And he has forever changed his outlook because of his interaction with her that day. And just not only how accurate she was in things that he obviously had never even heard of her, right? Like I was the one that was like bought the tickets. He didn't even know what he was getting into, and to have such a specific reading, but also just the positivity and the energy that comes from her and the storytelling and the things she shared about her own life. Like she's a miraculous and wonderful and just incredibly healing human being. And I'm so excited you both are connecting this way and you get to interview her. Please just share
Oh,
my absolute adoration for her. I've been in a group reading, maybe 2 group readings with her now of like 10 people. And my reading was also incredible. The last one that I remember,
so
one group where it was
that
like me.
was the testimony. I know that's very long, but it was such a beautiful story about how she went in with DJ. I've read DJ too. His brother came to me out of the blue. He was helping me pack up my car one day, and all of a sudden I said, "Your brother's here. He's talking about windsurfing." And he's like, "Oh my God." So it's just so that's just, I'm sure that's one of like 1,000 stories you could tell.
Well, the brother is obviously working overtime, DJ's brother. But what
He
I love
is. Yeah.
about this message is that you have someone coming into an uncomfortable situation, and is coming because they love someone, which is why the spirits come. You know,
Yep.
they come in love, and I work at the frequency of love. And so, what that means is only the good spirits are allowed to communicate. Actually, those are the only spirits these days that I do communicate with because I work at the frequency of love. And it's the details, it's the little details of life that make a difference. You know, those evidential details, the things the people that we love also loved, and the way they continue to work with us in our lives and are part of our lives. So I just love that whole idea of moving from exclusion. Oh, we can only be connected to spirits in one way through religion, to opening that up. You know, as one woman said to me when I opened the door to my office, she looked at me, she burst into tears, and she said, I am here because my priest has told me that my son will be separated from me forever. Her son had committed suicide. And she said, so I'm coming to you for a second opinion. What this woman couldn't understand was a God who loves us all and a God who loves his son would ever stand between a mother and a son. And so this woman wasn't willing to accept exclusionary understanding of connection with spirits, but wanted to include God, the church, and her son. And so that's what I like too about, you know, Candace and DJ moving from this small idea of spirit into the big idea of spirit, because it comes down essentially to love.
Oh, that was so beautiful, Hollister. I agree. And that is something that comes up a lot, as you know, because most people that I interact with are very interested nowadays. It's become more socially acceptable as Tyler Henry has become a celebrity, the Long Island Medium has become a celebrity, John Edward, and some people still think they're fakes. And that's totally fine. As Long Island Medium says, I'm not here to convince you. I'm just passing on a message. So I agree with you that somebody told me the other day on, I don't know, I think it might have been a comment on here that said, have fun dealing with Satan or something. And I said, oh, I don't. I don't. So, um, and I said, well, and I literally asked a real question. I said, this is a genuine question. Why would you assume that these messages of love couldn't possibly be coming from someone's loved ones on the other side? And I don't know if they responded or not. I haven't read it. If they have,
Well,
um, yeah,
I really love having been doing this work long enough to see the change in general, moving from limited audiences to worldwide audiences,
yeah,
this understanding of, is it real? Is it real? Is it real? And then moving into it being part of many people's everyday experience. That's what I'm loving. When I started teaching mediumship, I knew that I wasn't necessarily making mediums, like these people weren't necessarily going to go out and everybody's going to be a professional medium. But what it does is it encourages us all learning more about mediumship, studying to expand our own consciousness, because it's in that way that we allow spirits to have a place on this earth plane. They want to be here and they want to help us, but we have to be aware and allow ourselves space in our lives and in our minds and in our brains and all of this for them. I used to think that communication happened because we wanted it to. Like, we just dial up the people we want to hear from. And then I started meeting spirits that people didn't even know about. I'd be giving a message. They didn't even know who some of these relatives were, but they were discussing either deep family secrets or deep woundings or patterns within a family, legacies, unwanted. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute, this work is about healing. These spirits are showing up. They want this to happen even more than we do. So all of a sudden, it started to go from mediumship as a work of self service because I want to connect with my loved ones into, wait a minute, this is service to others. And it's bringing healing not only to our own families, but to the world at large. Because every time there is a healing, the light grows. And so that's why, I mean, I have never gotten bored at all doing what I do. There's a reason why I wrote that book, Everything You Wanted to Know About the Afterlife, but Were Afraid to Ask. Because the best questions were always asked after the event was over. People would come up to me and say, Hollister, what about this? What about that? I'm like, wow, I wish you had asked that during the Q&A section. I realized people were too shy sometimes to ask what happens if someone dies of a suicide. What happens if someone reincarnates and then I die? Am I going to miss them? These heartfelt questions, the idea that we may eternally be separated from the people that we love. So I started asking people to write down their questions and put them in a basket, and that's how I started answering the questions, almost like billet reading, pulling them out. And the book grew from that because my publisher saw me at an event do that thing where I would pull out messages, pull out questions, and then messages were often attached to those questions. So, yeah, that's where I come from as a medium. And so I'm very happy to see many people now moving into the tent and continuing the work. It's so exciting.
I agree. I teach mediumship as well, and I always tell people, you may not be here to be a medium. It might not be your calling, but we should not we should, but I think it's beneficial for all of us to learn to trust our intuition, to listen to what our guides are telling us, to listen to what our how our loved ones are attempting to communicate with us. It's just I call myself a spirit translator. It's we can all hear the language of spirit, but we might not even realize. I didn't realize it until I was middle-aged that I was receiving messages. I just they were there, but I didn't realize they were there. So we're just bringing awareness to other people that those quote unquote voices in your head, unless you have a mental illness, actually are something. They do mean they have meaning. So I would actually, and I have more questions about what you just said, but also I'd love to hear, would you mind sharing your origin story, how you realized you were a medium, or how you knew you were a medium, and how did you become a medium professionally?
Well, I have always had great interest in old things. As a child, I lived near a cemetery, and these days I live next door to a cemetery. And most people might think that is like horrific, but I always felt very, very connected to all people. My sister said, you know, Holly's so social. She doesn't care if people are dead or alive. And so there's an interest that I've had about people's stories. And when I was a child, my grandfather, who I loved, Pop, died. And everybody was telling me he had died and gone to be with Jesus. And I couldn't understand that because every night he was at the foot of my bed. And so there was this dissonance between what I was being told was the truth and what I was experiencing as the truth. Then I started seeing my friends' relatives. A friend's grandmother died. I connected with the grandmother and then all of a sudden realized my friend isn't seeing what I'm seeing. There was all of a sudden this, uh-oh, I'm different. And the worst thing is for a kid to feel different. I did not want to be different. So I did my best to shut down, close it out, try to be like everybody else. And it wasn't until I was in an extremely severe car crash that things opened up in a way that I could no longer tamp down. I could no longer ignore. So then I was faced with, how do I deal with this? How can I move what feels like an affliction and a very thing that makes me different into something that can be useful, helpful, and bring healing? So fortunately, I got introduced to a group of British mediums and British healers when I moved to Los Angeles. So I really loved that and got a lot of good training and understanding. And so I got very interested in specific information. So I sat in development circles for years and surrounded myself with other mediums and really supported other mediums. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bake the cookies and pour the lemonade. Do you know what I'm saying? And be there and enjoy it all. But of course, as I was working with all of these other mediums, I was also developing. And there came a time when friends of mine said, you need to do this. And that's how I started working professionally.
I'm curious about the car accident. Did you have an out of body experience, or was it more just a trauma that suddenly heightened your abilities?
Well, I woke up in the hospital thinking I was dead. I was lying on a gurney with a sheet over my head. So my first thought upon awakening was, so this is what it's like to be dead. So I thought that I was dead. I did not have any sort of typical near death experience, but I do believe that something did happen that changed
Yeah.
and changed my brain because after that, I was a very different person.
Mm-hmm. That's common, I think.
But the good news
Yeah.
is, you know what the real good news is? Kids these days don't have to go through all that trauma. Because what's happening is when you are raised in families that accept spirit communication as an everyday thing, you don't have to shut it down. So therefore, you don't have to force it open. Now kids are just always connected. The numbers of requests I get, can you work with my child or my child has this. So what I do is I help educate the parents to guide the children, help make it every day and just, this is, oh, you feel grandpa's here? Yeah, he's here. I mean, the kids connecting with loved ones in spirit, it's so exciting. And they don't have to shut down.
I love that you said that. I am a nanny and I'm a babysitter. And the other night I went to babysit for a new family, and I didn't know, but the parents had Googled me and found out what I do. And so they told their kids about it, which normally I wouldn't bring it up without their permission. But they said, this kid has some questions. She's 7. She was like, I heard you have superpowers. And I said, and I kind of was like, what is she talking about? And then she said, but how do you know the future? And I said, well, I don't know the future. That's not exactly what I do specifically. And she's like, but explain it to me. So before we were going to bed, I just thought, oh my God, she wants me to talk about quantum physics right now. So I just kind of tried to keep it simple. And finally she said, all right, Shannon, I have to go to bed. I have a big game tomorrow. But it was really beautiful because the dad was like, no, we told her because we thought that was so wonderful and we believe in that. And I said, I mean, it's wonderful because we all have this sixth sense, as they call it. We call it paranormal and supernatural, but it's really just natural and normal. But we're indoctrinated out of it in this culture, American, I guess, culture. Not a Native American. Native Americans have known all along, and that's why so many of them are mediums because it was never discouraged. And so I love that you said that because that's when children are lit up. And if somebody tells them that's not real, you're imagining things, then they're going to,
I'm so glad you
yeah,
said imagination because spirits use our imagination.
yes.
They will use the screen of our minds, our internal imagination to express themselves. And that's what makes it so easy for people to discount their own connection with their own spirits. You know, is it me or is it my imagination? I have an online course, a very simple, easy course to begin to get people in tune with, hey, you know, FOMO, is it me or is it spirit, and begin to differentiate that. But yeah, they will use our imagination to show up and connect with us. And so that's why kids and creative people have this automatic connection with the spirits. I mean, I remember my girlfriend's grandmother, when I first saw her grandmother, I opened up the cabinet. They had like an armoire, and I opened it up, and there was her grandmother's head talking to me. You know, and it didn't seem strange at all to me. I mean, thinking about it now, it's really weird, but it didn't seem at all strange. And she didn't think it was strange either. But then you think about Alice in Wonderland and the Cheshire Cat starts disappearing, and then all you see is the head. You know, as kids, there's a very, very misty line between what is real and what is not. That's why I like the idea of magic in the title of your podcast, because kids live in that world of all things are possible, which is the same world that the spirits live in. So there's just a natural affinity with spirits and children.
That's so well said. I love that. And yeah, I just think it's a shame that so many of us were shut down. I don't think personally I knew what was happening, but I was very, very sensitive. So, fortunately, my mother is also. So she always knew. She was taking psychic classes and that sort of thing. It's beautiful. So thank you for saying that. That's so well said. Um, so I would love to know when you were talking about these questions that you're answering. So people are like, what happens after we die? What happens? Is there reincarnation? How do you, Hollister, know the answers to those questions? However you want to answer that.
It it depends on what the question is. So one of first the first question in the book, Everything You Wanted to Know About the Afterlife, is this question: is there really an afterlife? Now, having been a medium for all of these years and been sensitive to spirits all of my life, it's kind of like, what? Do we really have to answer that? But what the real shock was is that question was answered on a cruise with my publisher and a whole group of metaphysicians. So other teachers, I thought, see, but someone was afraid to ask this in this group of metaphysicians, right? Animal communicators, you know, Akashic records people, all of this stuff. But somebody really wasn't sure and wanted to know. And I thought, oh my gosh, now I could have been completely flippant, you know, pulled that out, looked at it, and I read it aloud. Is there really an afterlife? And I could have been flippant and made a joke because I was really surprised that that was being asked. But instead, what I did was I paused and I asked Spirit, give me the answer you would have me give. Because, you know, my own answer would just be sarcasm, probably. So I paused. And as I paused, I saw people's loved ones starting to show up around them in the audience. And with one voice, they said, "There is no afterlife, there's only life." Mic drop, right, Spirit? Mic drop. And oh, I'm getting chills as I say that. In that moment, you know, there's there was such a continuation. It was so powerful, this continuation of life. I remember I met a young man who said to me from Spirit, "I saw the light, then I saw the light." It's like I gave it verbatim to his mother, and she said, "Yes, that's exactly what happened." He was on his skateboard and he hit a light pole and he died. So he saw the light and then he saw the light. It's that fast. Death is almost not existent. I've spoken with, and it's not nearly as much of a process as we make it out to be. I have spoken with spirits who fly out of their bodies at the time their car hits a tree, or it's just not the big deal we make it out to be. And so that's how that question was answered. Other questions are answered simply by the hours and hours and hours of conversation with spirits and kind of the consensus of what many of them say about one thing.
Yeah.
And then my own personal experience. So, reincarnation, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
People are always wondering, am I going to miss the people I love? Will they reincarnate and they'll be on some other part of the world? And then what happens? Well, what I've discovered, because I have clients all over the world and my books are translated, et cetera, into different languages. So I have the opportunity to speak with people of different cultures and religious backgrounds. So when I speak with people in Asia, their people reincarnate pretty darn quickly. And I was shocked once when I was on the phone with someone in India. I believe they were in India. And I had a spirit standing in front of me who said, "Grandfather is here." And so I said to the person on the phone, "Grandfather is here," just like I heard it. And she said, "Yes, he is. He was born yesterday." I'm like, what? So the spirit was not grandfather. See, I was just assuming. I thought he was announcing himself. It was grandfather's brother. It was great uncle who was announcing that grandfather had been born. This woman said, "Yes, my grandchild, my daughter was born, or a child was born within the family, has all the birthmarks that grandfather had." All of this. They were fully expecting him to be born. So, in the Western world, however, I hear a whole different story from the spirits, which is, "I will wait for you. We will come and go with groups." There's the idea of the Western world not being part of the reincarnation karmic wheel, because in the Western world, freedom is a very, very high value. Freedom, self determination, independence. I mean, after all, in the United States, we have the Declaration of Independence. So, in that independence, people will choose to be born into these cultures to step off that karmic wheel, to bring healing, let's say, to families, to release those patterns and break that kind of, on, off, on, off, on, off, or around, we're coming in the door, we're going out, we're coming in, we're going out. So, in the Western world, and so I'm talking about Europe, the United States, and some of the Americas. Um, I will wait for you, is what I hear. But no matter what, reincarnation never separates us from those we love. It's not set up that way. It's set up for connection, learning, and freedom from patterns and from karma. So those who live in reincarnation aren't expecting people. They aren't missing them because there they are. But those of us who are stepping off that wheel, our loved ones will wait for us. We will never miss the people we love, because the world, the universe, and all of existence is set up for connection, not separation.
Beautifully said. I studied with Monica the medium, and in her book, she talks about this is sort of what I've always understood, and I'd love to know your thoughts about it. That when we talk about reincarnation, I get that question too. Well, what if my grandma reincarnates? Then I'm not going to be able to connect with her. And she described it as a clementine fruit, and we all have these wedges of our. The clementine fruit is the higher self. The wedges are individual pieces of that higher self. Also, there's no time. I'm getting chills. There's also no time on the other side. So we're actually living all of these parallel lives at the same time, everything, everywhere, all at once. So I'm getting chills. So I'd love to know what you say, because that's how I've sort of reconciled it, because I know I've never had a reading where someone just wasn't there. Like maybe the message wasn't that clear, but yeah. So I'd love to know your thoughts about that concept.
Well, I have had groups where an expected spirit does not show up, but it's
Same.
never what the people think.
Yeah.
It's never, I don't want to be here and I'm,
Yeah.
and I'm gone. Um, the way the spirits work with me, because all of this is true. Yes, the segments, the higher self, the part of us that is choosing to live this incarnation, the existence of many selves. When my dear beloved Brett died, the first thing he said when he came back, I was sitting with a group of my friends who were mediums, and the first thing he said was, I have met my many selves. And we were like, wow, okay, that's interesting and heavy. So, all of these different aspects of us. However, for the purposes of spirit communication and healing, the spirits present themselves in the eternal present moment. And that's where we meet them, where everything exists all at once, past, present, future. It's all there. But they will manifest in the way that we will recognize them. So if I say, oh, your father's here and he is a Roman centurion, you'd be like, what? No, he has to come with the identifiers of the most recent, or at least the incarnation that you would recognize. So for all that we're talking about with the clementine and and all of this stuff, everything existing all at once, it is all about connection. It is all about we are part of the whole. And so that's what mediumship, when you dial down into it, it is about reestablishing the connections that people believe ended with death. That's really what it's like. We are the connectors. We're going, like the Sistine Chapel, there's God and Adam or whatever. I'm just not even sure whether it's God and Adam, but you see those two fingers and it's kind of like ET phone home. It's that joining, that connection. That's what we as mediums, that's what we're all about. And that's why the little things and the evidence are so important, because the quantum physics, the quantum mechanics, and all of that, oh, yes, it exists. But the bottom line, the thing that people really want to know is, are you there? And do you still love me? And if you couldn't love me or couldn't love yourself while you were here on this earth plane, has that changed? Can you now love? And do you know how much we love you? That's what people really want to know. And it's the details about that person's life that will have someone believe that there has been a change, a healing, and that person is still there. So, as mediums, it's very simple. We can all get in the weeds and we can all talk about the big things. And I love all of that. But when it comes down to it, love holding all of this together and that connection. What matters are the small details of life, because the people who love us care about the details of our lives. So, for instance, I did a spirit circle a couple days ago. One woman, her mother talks about going to the dentist. There's a cavity that has to be filled. This mother had lost all of her teeth and wanted her daughter to go to the dentist. And the daughter said, I had an appointment, I canceled it. Yes, mom, I'm going to go. That is love. That is caring. Plus, it's a detail. It was something she was dealing with right then. But of course, that's what her mother would say. Her mother would say, look, I lost all of my teeth because I didn't care for them the way I want you to care for your teeth. Because the thing is, when we talk about self care, it sounds selfish, but it's not. It is the way that the spirits demonstrate their love for us. They inspire us to care for ourselves. And it's really them caring for us and our own hands doing it. So that's what I find in many of my messages is, okay, there's your son is going to a new school and there were three that you were looking at and you weren't sure, but yes, this one, this Montessori school or whatever with this specialized, thing with the art, yes, your son will love that, that kind of thing, where it really is what you would have talked with the person about had they been here,
Hmm.
or wanted to talk with them about if they couldn't be present in your life at all. So often relationships are new. The father you never knew growing up, and all of a sudden shows up in spirit. And there's that connection with a
Yeah.
birth father you never knew who was hidden from you. So, those kinds of healings, it's all about love, it's all about connection.
Beautifully said. For those who don't know what it's like to receive messages from spirit, how do you, I know that everybody has different ways of receiving their information, but what is it like for you when you're connecting with the spirit? How do you know what they're saying?
I have made it my business to elevate all of my senses: clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairgustance. So I have really worked hard to develop all of my psychic senses and all of my abilities to communicate with spirits. And the reason I chose to do that, and the reason I teach that way as well, is because all of us have a dominant sense. And so if you're communicating with a spirit who didn't talk a lot in life, they're not going to jabber on at you
Yeah.
in spirit. But if they were visual, they'll give you pictures. So you've got to be sure that your clairvoyance is working. So you want to be able to present the information in the manner that the spirit provides it. So one of the exercises that I will do with students is, let's all go to lunch. We're going to take a lunch break and experience your lunch in your least dominant sense. So everything you eat, everything you see, all of that, put it through that sense and come back and we're going to discuss it. It's a whole different world when all of a sudden you are exercised, because we get very dependent on one thing. And I've seen this with mediums who get very dependent on their clairvoyance. And then if they can't see anything, they lose it,
Yeah.
because what am I supposed, so I'm like, okay, we got to shift gears on a car. So now we move into clairsentience. This spirit is coming with feeling. This is a feeling spirit. Everything was about how this spirit felt, lived by her heart. And so as soon as the person says, yes, she lived by her heart, yes, she did, everything was all about heart with her. So the way the spirit chooses to communicate with a dominant sense is very indicative of who they are and who they were as a person on this earth plane. So that's why it's important to work with all of your senses.
Yes, I was very reliant on clairvoyance in the beginning. And now, over whatever 6 years that I've been studying and working, people assured me that it would come together. And I thought, I feel like it's like rubbing your stomach and patting your head all at the same time. But eventually, it's like playing an instrument or learning your iPhone. It becomes sense memory.
The trickier thing is when you get a piece of information, a piece of information, a piece of information. So you'll hear a name, let's say, you'll see a picture, and you'll feel something. How do those things go together?
Yeah.
So what I do myself and how I work with other mediums is, if you don't know how those things go together, do not make it up.
Yeah.
Just simply give it as you get it. Name, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling. Because there are things that you're just not going to understand. That is not, understanding is not your job. Your job is to provide the information and the evidence. The meaning and the value is the job of the person who has come to see you and the spirit. So there could be a whole family history, and you have no idea what that would be and how these three things would ever go together in any reality. That's not your job. So it's always just give it as you get it. I'm feeling this, I'm hearing that, I'm sensing this. Yeah.
That's really great advice. I think I've been guilty of that in the past, and now I've learned to just I don't know what this means as long as you know what it means, and I'd love to know what it means. But it's true. I tell my clients, we're going to play a game of charades together between you, me, and your spirit person or people. And they're going to give me symbols. I'm going to give them to you. You have to be open minded and think sometimes outside the box a little bit. But then we're going to put the pieces together. And I've learned too over time that the pieces always come together. And so in the beginning, it's a little scrambly. And then by the end, I go, up, now we have a full story. Now we're putting the pieces together.
It's about developing a lexicon with the spirits and shorthand. So I will say to someone, um, I'm being shown this. And when I'm shown this, I know it means this,
Yeah.
because the spirits will develop, sometimes they'll use a peace sign, which kind of comes down out of the sky and floats over people's heads. I have a series of symbols, words, and visual cues that will help put it all together. So I know when they're using those things, what those things mean. So if, for instance, there was a father who quit smoking, I will see a cigarette, and then I will see that international sign of the
Ghostbusters.
no smoking sign. So I will see the cigarette, or I will smell cigarette smoke. Sometimes they'll show me the pack. I'll go, oh, Marlboros. Yes, dad smoked Marlboros. Then I'm seeing the no smoking sign. He stopped smoking. Then all of a sudden, I can't breathe. I said, but I'm feeling congestive heart failure. I feel like my lungs are filling up with fluid and my heart gives out. Yes, he died of congestive heart failure. And then dad will say something like, see, it didn't matter. I could have smoked right to the end. She goes, oh, he always used to say that. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it comes. It will come in pieces, and the spirits are really, really funny. So
Oh my
that's what
gosh.
I love the sense of humor.
I know. Can you think I don't can you think of any specifics on that one like an example of something funny that a spirit showed you or does it all or do you have to
Well,
think about that?
one of the funniest things that ever happened was a guy in the front row sitting like this, and of course, spirit has to go to him, right? I'm like, oh, fabulous. So I said,
Yeah.
sir, I have a man here. He says father, and he gives me the name Tom, and he looks at me and goes, "There's no Tom in our family." And his wife goes like this. She goes, "That's your name." He was so wanting me to be wrong about everything that he had this psychic amnesiac moment and didn't even fess up that was his own name. But one of the most delightful things that has happened recently, I've been wanting to really connect with the younger generation, specifically like with the 20 to 35 group, or even younger, like the 18 to 35 group. Um, because that's where our greatest hope on this planet lies, So I really want to be part of that and part of their experience and bring spirit into that. So I was doing a Facebook Live, and as I was doing the Facebook Live, I got a Facebook message, and I saw it pop up on the screen as I was doing the live, and it said, "This is a really off the wall kind of crazy thing and it's weird." And I just sent back a message, "Yes." I didn't even know what it was. And then I thought, "What the heck did I do?" Well, it turns out it was an improv group, a comedy improv group who wanted me to give messages, and then they were going to do improv from the messages.
Oh, wow.
So late one night, I drove into Hollywood, got up on a stage, and gave messages to a young date night group. It was a Friday night group, okay? So it was boyfriends, girlfriends, friends, there they were. We had so many people, we had to put them on the stage. We had audience members on the stage because it was just so packed. And so I would give a message, and then they weren't the improv actors weren't necessarily acting out the message, but they were taking elements of the message
Yeah.
and spinning tales. And it was so funny. Afterwards, one of the young men came up to me and said, I really hope that you don't think we were being disrespectful to your work in any way. I said, are you kidding? The spirits love
Yeah.
it. The more
Yeah.
people can laugh, the easier it is for them to communicate, because grief gets shaken up. It just gets broken up into pieces. It shatters when we laugh, and spirit can come through.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's death here is I mean it's a terrible thing for those remaining. Grief is a real thing, and it's very difficult and it's very sad, but because there's so much heaviness around the topic of death, it is so fun when a spirit comes through with so much humor and they make us laugh and they say funny things, and I know, like you, they all become kind of a blur. I don't have anything specific, but I know the other day I had a reading and I just remember the the, the person, the guy was like, I was a really good looking guy back in the day. And they all start laughing. Oh, it was yeah. And they all start laughing like he was like, I'm having a blast. He was kind of like making jokes with everybody, referring to holiday memories, just to show that you miss me and I know that, but I am so okay. I am not in pain. I am happy. I'm having the time of my life. I have nothing but beautiful memories. And please don't be afraid to laugh as you remember me, because that's how I want to be remembered. And as you said, there is no afterlife, there's only life. So it's hard for us in this density to feel that. But I would love for you to share what you know or understand about why it is that we come into this dense realm and these dense bodies. Why do souls choose to come into this
Yes,
world?
and I'd be happy to answer that, but I just want to talk a little bit about grief.
Please do.
Spirits understand that we are grieving, and so they really do go out of their way. The oddest thing I started to notice when I wrote my first book, I said to spirit, I said, okay, I will work for you. Just don't give me kids. Don't give me grieving parents. Don't give me kids. Don't give me kids who have killed themselves. Don't. And then the week after I tried to declare that as my boundary, um, I had 4 parents who accidentally killed their own children.
Oh,
And I said to Spirit, okay, I see the healing here. I see what I need to do. And so my first book was about life after death, ways we die, lessons from children in spirit, young ones in spirit. And what I started to notice was those who died by their own hand were often the first to show up. We think of suicide as a conversation ender. It's like the period at the end of the sentence. That's it. Goodbye, all. No explanation in many cases. I'm done with you. I'm rejecting you and everything you stand for. And so I found it so interesting that suicide after suicide after suicide, they so wanted to reconnect. And there was an understanding not only of grief, but of grievance. And this is the thing that the spirits want to deal with. It's not just grief around their loss, it's the judgment that we place around how they died, especially in cases of murder, negligence, accidental overdose. We want someone, we're angry about the method, the way it happened, that this person was taken from us. So there's grievance, which can actually divide us from the very thing we desire, which is connection with the people we love. So that is one of the reasons why spirits will use humor, is it gets us out of the grievance. And that I once said to a woman, a mother, he says he's okay. She says, "Can you tell him I'm not?" Okay. And that was anger. It wasn't grief. It was anger because this young man had died by suicide. So the spirits will deal with grievance because that is the grief does not separate us from those we love in spirit. Grief is a process, and we all go through that. I, as a medium, have gone through that when I've lost people that I love. But it's the grievance part of it that is the true separator from ourselves and the people that we love. So now, what was it that you asked? I totally got off on the
Thank you, because grief is a huge part of our work. Being able to hold space for it, acknowledging it, which you do so beautifully. And this is my little, yeah, disclaimer that I know that we also what I actually love about doing this work is you're not just bringing through evidence, you're holding space for someone and you're getting to meet the person that they miss and let them share memories, which is also therapeutic. It's like it's a real therapeutic thing to say, let's talk about your son. Some people don't want to. I have a friend that passed and his mom is struggling because her son and her husband will not talk about it. And she's very alone in that. And she said they refuse to discuss it. And so sometimes just having someone like us be there to say, I see you and I feel your son's energy and I can feel how much he loves you and I can tell you all these wonderful things. And maybe they don't want to keep draining their friend. They think they might be draining their friends about it or whatever. So it is one part acknowledging, I know this doesn't make it easier, but I hope it brings some comfort amidst the grief, that it doesn't
well,
bring, yeah.
and what it does is it moves people through the trauma of the death and how people have died and what we tell ourselves, because the spirits will have a very different story. So when there
Right.
was a young man, his parents witnessed him running across a field lit on fire due to a fireworks display
Oh,
issue, right? And he told me he watched himself running. So he was already out of his
yes.
body. Okay, so he said, I saw myself running. And I thought, what is that? I kind of look like a Roman candle or whatever it was,
Yeah.
isn't that pretty? And all of a sudden it was, wait a minute, he didn't suffer in the way we have been imagining him suffer. We thought that that he was in this horrible pain, that there was, whereas he was above it all, looking at it happening, because the body's going to do what the body's going to do. And the spirit can easily just separate out and look at that and go, wow, okay. So the moving beyond the trauma of the death and what we tell ourselves about it is one of the greatest gifts that the spirits want to bring to those people they love, because people will, that's the only story they know, is the one that's in their own heads, what they think they witnessed or what they were told. I spoke with a young man who was hit by a train and dragged. What he said, he said, I heard the train whistle, and the kid always loved trains, and
Mm.
then I was up in the air. So he went up in the air out of his body, and his body was taken by the train. So that kind of thing, it just changes what we tell ourselves about the story. And it begins to break the loop about how awful this thing is. This is what I'm saying. Death is just so much easier than we make it out to be. We tell ourselves how awful it is to sit by the bedside. And I did this with my own mother. When the breathing becomes labored, when it's very, very difficult, and it seems like their eyes get wide and they're struggling, and oh my God, they want to stay here, or they're terrified, or that's, we tell ourselves all sorts of things, which really may not be the truth. That's why I like to hear it from the spirits themselves.
Me too. And I'm going back to our question, but I just wanted to add that as I have interviewed hundreds of near death experiencers, the one thing I've taken away is not to fear how we die. Obviously, there are worse ways than other that involve suffering up until the time when you pass. But I used to be so afraid of flying, even though I'd done it since I was a baby, and so I'm pretty comfortable traveling internationally. But my mom would say, "Well, you wouldn't know anyway." Would I? And I'm like, "But yes, I would. I'd know that it was happening. I'd know." And what I've learned though is that everyone I've interviewed who has died and left their body and come back said, 1 minute, just like you said, my friend Renu, who was on this show, saw the bus coming. All of a sudden, she's above her body. She's watching it happen. Felice, my friend, my other wonderful friend, she also got hit by a truck. She didn't witness it. And I think it might have been Ginny Jablonski, but who was trampled by a stampede of horses. She said, I looked down and said, "Oh, that poor woman." It Your soul will protect you. So that has brought, I'm getting so many chills right now. Your soul will protect your, like you said, the body will do what it needs to do. It's also going to create endorphins so that you don't feel pain. So I know it may seem grim, but it has brought me a lot of comfort to know that if something does happen, every single person I know who's left has said, I wasn't even there when it happened. So hope that brings what you just said and what I've learned brings some people some element of peace. And so the question I had for you, the bigger kind of philosophical question is, what are we doing here? Why are our souls in these human bodies in this on this place that we call Earth, or actually in other galaxies as well? Because I do believe that is, we do reincarnate as different life forms in different galaxies, but here in this Earth specifically.
Well, I think this is a great question to end our time together with,
Yeah.
because I think that that is really the question we all have to come to terms with, which is, why are we here?
Yeah.
And I think that we make it so much harder than it really is. It simply comes down to love, experiencing it, sharing it, giving it, learning all aspects of it. Here on this earth plane, our love is very fractured. It's filial love, it's romantic love, it's, you know, this kind of love, that kind of love, appropriate love, non appropriate love. You know what I'm saying? Love for pets. It's divided in and fractured. But in spirit, love is unconditional. And so those spirits that I've spoken with who have done horrific things on this earth plane to either their families or to other people, who have um, caused terrible pain on this earth plane, either by the way they chose to leave it or how they chose to live. Um, what they tell me is, at the frequency of love, and sometimes this is not self-generated love, like they don't die and suddenly become this ball of love, but it is often the love of those who tried to love them while they were here, or the love of guides and angels and those who have met them to move them forward. That it is in that cradle of love that they are able to look at their lives and feel and understand exactly how their actions, their thoughts, their deeds have wounded those they've loved or those they thought they loved. And it is in that space that the spirit is elevated, that healing takes place. And that is often the motivation to connect with people still on this earth plane, because all of a sudden you get it. And love is no longer fractured, and it's no longer limited. It is unconditional, and it is limitless. And that is why I work at the frequency of love, because in that space, that is what they want to bring to us. Because if we look at our lives, wherever we have any personal pain, it is because of a challenge around love, either not loving ourselves enough, loving someone too much, loving someone in a way they can't accept. It is always a love problem on this earth plane, always. And so that is what brings the healing, is meeting the spirits at the frequency of love. And that's what I do.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Hollister. Your website is hollisterrand.com. Am I correct?
Correct.
I will have the link below, but is there anything else you'd like to share about events that you're hosting, workshops, etc., that you'd like to
Yes,
share?
it's all on my website, but I
Perfect.
do in-person circles. I'm located in Los Angeles. My office is in Sherman Oaks. I do spirit circles in person in Burbank and in Santa Barbara, which is where I am right now. And I also do circles online. I do private sessions online and in person. And so let's not be strangers, because I am an accessible medium. People can find me, they can set up even a private in-home circle. I will do those. I have some online courses, and I'm hoping to get back into, teaching in person again. So yeah, I'm a hardworking medium and I love it. So I look forward to meeting some of your people who listen to this.
I look forward to attending some of these events now that this has been reminded. I have been reminded of this. So I look forward to attending some of your events, as many as I can get in on. So I will be in touch with you as well. Thank you so much, Hollister Rand, for spending time with me. So happy to finally have met you in person. I've heard nothing but wonderful things about you, and now I know why. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what you do next and to hearing about any from any of my listeners what your experiences have been once you worked with Hollister. Please feel free to drop comments below. And appreciate your time so much. It's so lovely to have spent time with you.
It's just delightful. I always love talking about spirit.
So do I.
It's just the best way to spend some time. All right.
I feel filled with spirit, and I mean that. I've been feeling them the whole time we're here. So thank you for bringing your beautiful energy to the to this room and to me and to my listeners.
Delighted to be here.